With Octopath Traveler 0 right around the corner at the time of writing, I finally got around to playing the second entry in the series. Octopath Traveler 2 is one of the best RPGs of the last decade. I want to get that out of the way before I get into my hopefully not baseless critique. The things it does well, it does amazingly well. Before I get going, just know that there will be some spoilers in this video, and that the videos you see will be fairly detached from what I'm saying. I'm working on my video editing, but it's just not there right now. So enjoy your random clips that I somehow managed to take. Alright, just to let you know where I got with this game. I put in over 70 hours and got to the last stage of the final boss, lost once, and threw in the towel. This isn't meant as an indictment of that fight, which while hard wasn't really unfair, but it does speak to where I was at personally with the game though. I was just done. I was dragging ass for the previous 5 hours trying to get across the finish line. I saw that my current character setup just wasn't going to get the job done, figured it'd probably take a couple hours to figure out a setup that worked, and just didn't want to. If you know me, you know I'm nothing if not a quitter. My fatigue for the game down the home stretch doesn't change a thing about what I liked and disliked about it, though. I'm not really going to compare it much to Octopath 1. That's a game that I played for maybe 20 hours and wanted to like a lot more than I actually did. And Octopath 2 is definitely an evolution rather than a rethinking, but it's a fantastic evolution. Everything is better here. But for me, some things still just weren't there. And I think it all comes down to the developers' ambitions and where they were kept rather small, and some structural issues with the game design itself that pushed the writers into awkward places that forced expedience over ambition. There is, however, one place where the ambition was huge, and that's combat and character building. Now to be fair, Octopath 1 knocked it out of the park the first time around in combat, so the foundation was already strong. This is a turn-based system, and for my money, it's the best version of turn-based combat ever made. You can have your Atlas games, your Like a Dragons, your Clair Obscurs, and those are all very good systems, but I think this beats them all. It's all based around discovering your opponent's weaknesses, breaking their shield, and going to town. Your characters build up boost by using their standard attack, spells, and skills each turn, which can then be spent on later turns. This sounds pretty simple, and for random encounters it very much is, but the bosses are another story altogether. Each one feels like a totally unique challenge while never relying on gimmicks. It's quite frankly an amazing feat to pull off. I lost a lot of the boss fights on my first try, well, at least when I wasn't over-leveled, which sometimes you just are going to be based on the structure of the game, but I lost very few fights on the second time around, which means maybe I should try that final boss again, but I don't think I was really close on that one. But I think this is actually a strength of the game. You learn so much from your initial failures, and it's not just knowing the opponent's weaknesses so you don't have to flail around the first couple turns trying out your weapons and spells. Each boss gives you a great understanding of the possibility space of what they can do. Can they protect their weaknesses? How? Do they have special attacks you can't endure? After the first fight, you're going to have ample material to adjust your strategy. Sometimes you'll want to make some changes to your character build, sometimes you need to rethink how you spend your boost, and sometimes you need to think about buffs and debuffs. Quick aside. Buffs and debuffs are 1. Insanely powerful, and 2. Much harder to apply and keep applied than in most RPGs. And I don't know that any of the bosses are immune to any of them like in Final Fantasy, where they pretty much all are, but I would recommend using them better than I did. But the real fuel that makes the battle system go is Octopath's character customization. Each character starts with a base job. I started the game with Throne the Thief. She came with a couple of deeply mediocre skills like the Thief Classic Steal. Each character also has a unique latent skill that charges as you take damage or break enemies. Hers just gives her an extra turn, which is useful, but not amazing. At the beginning of the game, that's pretty much all there is. You earn job points from fights along with experience and potch. You can use those points to unlock new skills at increasing job point prices, and you have the freedom to unlock a job's first 6 skills in any order you want. Once you've unlocked all 6, you'll be able to unlock that job's 7th skill. As you get into the game, you'll find guilds. There's one guild for each of the 8 base jobs, and some bonus ones, and you'll find them scattered across the world. They'll allow you to equip secondary jobs, so this is where the fun actually starts, as you can start to mix and match your jobs. One of the cool things is that job points you earn are not tied to a specific job. You can equip a secondary job and immediately gain all the skills if you have the job points saved up. And sometimes you will want that, because I buried the lead, simply because I like burying leads. As you unlock skills 4 through 7 for each job, you gain a support skill specific to that job. This is really one of the most fun things in the system. Unlike the active skills, you don't know what these are going to be until the first time you unlock them, which will generally be done by the character who has that as their primary job. And each character can choose 4 support skills from any of the job whose active skills they've learned. Doesn't matter which secondary job they have equipped, there's just so much flexibility in character building that comes from this. If you really enjoy min-maxing and experimentation with builds, there is so much to work with here. I didn't really, to be honest. I found some things that worked and stuck with them. Why? Well, partially because I'm lazy, but mostly because there's just so much game here. I'll certainly revisit Octopath 2 in a couple years and try to play it very differently than I did the first time, but on the first playthrough, the size of the game deterred me. I just wanted to get through things at times rather than think about and fiddle with the permutations of secondary jobs and support skills. Mechanics are where this game's ambitions shine. Even if you don't think as highly of the character construction and battle systems as I do, it's difficult to claim they aren't thoughtful and ambitious. Another aside here, there are a couple of other things I think are not particularly ambitious but are very well done. Octopath Traveler 1 was the creator of the 2D HD style, and Square and Acquire, who I think are especially responsible for this style as they were brought on for graphic stuff, are still the best in the business. You can have your Dragon Quest remakes, your Star Ocean S, your Eiyuden Chronicle. To me, Octopath still looks the best. And why? It's the pixel work on enemies. I have fairly mixed opinions on the generic enemy pixel art. Some of it's good, but a lot of it feels really busy to me. The bosses are what make the art so special. From Throne's story, Mother and Father's arts were standouts to me. Whoever designed those deserves tons of awards. I'm still having nightmares about Father. Guy looks like he would literally eat me. The music was also fantastic. A lot of the time when I'm playing games, I listen to other things. Music, YouTube videos, powerful videos from my video platform, Nebula. Just kidding, but call me guys. Whatever, but I appreciated the soundtrack on this one part especially, but I'll loop back around when that's relevant. The English voice acting was also very good, with just a couple of exceptions. Like, why does Particio sound so old? And whatever was going on with Elrond, I did not enjoy that. But in many ways, I feel like that's just table stakes for Square Enix. Even when their games don't wow me, which is often, the talent working on graphics, music, and voice acting are always near the top of the profession. They deserve attention, don't get me wrong, but I don't think these things can really be discussed in terms of ambition because they're just good work that aims for excellence. Alright, here's where the video takes a bit of a turn. I'm mostly done saying nice things. Getting back to the thesis, where exactly does Octopath 2 lack ambition? Well, it's 3 areas. 1, the world. 2, the characters. And 3, the storytelling. While I have some issues with the execution of each of these facets of the game, I don't think they're necessarily bad. I think they actually achieve what they set out to do. I just question why they set out to achieve something so small. It's difficult to talk about this game without mentioning the games that clearly inspired it, especially the Dragon Quest series. This is doubly true when talking about the world of Octopath Traveler 2. Dragon Quest doesn't generally have the most cohesive or thoughtful worlds, and I'm going to mostly discuss Dragon Quest XI here. Although it's not one of the older games that I think maybe had more inspiration for Octopath than it was very intentionally designed as an homage to the history of the series. And I love Dragon Quest XI. I think it's a great game, and it's a useful comparison to Octopath for a couple of reasons. I think it's a clear inspiration, and it's also to some extent built around short stories in much the same way. Although it also has a through plot that makes a whole lot more sense and is way more important than Octopath. More on that later. The main reason I bring this up is that the world of Dragon Quest XI is more or less nonsense. The designers wanted to build a city that was just like Venice. So they did. They wanted an Arabian-inspired city, so they made one of those. City that's just Japan? Gotta have one of those. Do politics exist? Well, yes and no. There are kings and queens and whatnot. What are they ruling over? Seems like it's just a single city in most cases. And what about religion? There's a vaguely Catholic church with unclear beliefs. It's omnipresent but pretty much meaningless. And this is all fine, mind you. The designers of Dragon Quest XI didn't want to tell a story about these things. They didn't need an Ivalice. And the locations are all fun and full of charm and lovingly rendered. These locations are classic Dragon Quest, tied together by the cohesive visual flair of the game and 30 years of Dragon Quest history. Octopath's 2 world is much the same with one critical difference. The locations are bland, vehicles of necessity for story beats. Settings include Old West Mining Town. That one's good, actually. New York City, I guess? Brr, it's cold. Hey look, it's old-timey Japan. We have a church. Library. And several instances of what the fuck ever. I don't know, things have to happen somewhere, right? Taken on their own, All these cities are fine except for maybe the last ones. They're beautifully made like everything in this game. They're also soulless and uninspired. They're simply because something has to be there, so they settled for RPG cliches. The world is also devoid of politics except in one key case, Hikari's story. The nation of Ku is a rapacious war machine that's been terrorizing its neighbors for generations. Which neighbors, you might ask? I don't know, man. The nearby cities seem entirely unaware and untroubled. They do have a single vassal, though. Where is this vassal, you might ask? Well, it's all the way across the map, naturally. What about all the nations between those places? Well, they've never heard of Ku, actually. Have you heard about religion in this game? Get a load of this vaguely Catholic one with unclear beliefs. It's actually really critical to the overarching plot, if you consider that plot important. More on that later. But what's its footprint in the world? There is one church and one cathedral located in the same city for your convenience. They named the city after it. Neat. This is supremely lacking in ambition. They took some fantasy RPG Legos and tossed them on the floor for me to step on. The individual pieces are fine. Some of them are even good. Hello again, Ores Rush. But the thing about Legos is that they're intended to be connected together. Okay, dumb metaphor. But Morrowind, the world of Octopath Traveler 2, is not. As I move into the characters and finally the story, a word I'll probably be repeating a bit is archetypal. The storytelling, I believe, is supposed to be archetypal. And in some ways it is, but I think it often veers into nothing to say. Before I explain that further, let's introduce the characters. I've mentioned my main character, Throne the Thief. I can't tell you much about her personality because she kind of doesn't have one. She's cool and thief-like. Her story is the darkest in the game by a long shot, even though Oswald, yeah. But she doesn't seem to have anywhere near the level of PTSD you'd think. Then there's Temenos the Cleric. He's an inquisitor in church. You know, church, the one church. He's not evil like Spanish Inquisition inquisitors. He's more like a detective. He's very logical and even snarky, sarcastic, and playful, which is not a tone this game strikes with its other characters. Unlike real cops, he wants to get to the truth and he has the skills to do it. Oswald the Scholar is a quiet man. Magic in this game seems to involve a lot of math, I guess, and he's very cold and logical. Except when it comes to his family, he likes them a lot. Alright, that's 3 of the 8. All of those characters are totally alright with me. They're all a bit one-note, maybe two-note on a good day, but they're a little interesting. The remaining 5 characters I grouped together in my head as the game went on as the Toxic Positivity Crew. And here they are from my least to most favorite. Casti the Apothecary. She's nice. She likes saving lives. She has amnesia. Beholding her is beholding the void. Particio the Merchant. He's a socialist who is confused and thinks he's a capitalist because he doesn't read theory. He's the most toxically positive. He will offer jobs to people who attempted to murder him literally seconds before. Agnia the Dancer. She loves everyone and wants to be a star so that everyone can smile. Her mom, also a dancer, died young from basically dancing while ignoring her health. She's unbothered by this, although her father is very bothered. Hikari the Warrior. He's Ryu from Street Fighter. Satsui no Hado and all. You know the guy. Stoic Japanese fella who is fighting for the right reasons. Oshet the Hunter. She is nearly as toxically positive as Particio, but I love her anyway. She's a goofball who loves nature and jerky, aka eating dried nature. She just has a couple of rocks rattling around in her skull, but she's making the most of it. I only wrote a couple sentences about each character, and it's not because I suddenly don't enjoy being long-winded, it's because there's nothing else to say. These characters are made with no ambition. They are almost impossibly flat. I wish the designers good luck in telling a story with such sterile characters. It turns out they couldn't. Why is that exactly? The story beats are mostly fine. They're not amazing, but they're good, with some extreme exceptions. These characters are not only flat, but they're also static. None of them grow or change in any of the stories. Oswald maybe changed a bit, but only because he discovered new information. His personality didn't actually change. His behavior changed because of new facts. You can't tell an interesting story like this. And again, I don't think this was about the writers being bad necessarily. They were trying to tell archetypal stories, as I'll attempt to show next, but they didn't have a lot to say, and they ended up simplifying their characters to the point of disinterest. The sentence-to-sentence writing in this game is not bad at all. It's fine. But the direction of the stories is not much. This isn't to say I don't have some execution issues with the writing. Somehow the 8 individual stories felt both too short, in terms of events being jammed into a small space, and too long. Every conversation just had too many sentences that added nothing story-wise or in terms of character development. Would they have been better off with Hexapath Travelers with better fleshed out stories? Yeah, I think they probably would be. Alright, I'm not going to go over each of the 8 stories, that would be overkill. I'll just hit up one that demonstrates my point that they're just plot trying to be archetypal. The big bad enemies, where they exist, have very simple archetypal motivations that lead to them acting like lunatics, and this will show that very well. Hikari's story is a perfect example of this. Hikari is a good guy and a literal prince. He cares about the common people. His brother Mugen, on the other hand, is a total asshole. He's super into war and killing. He's next in the line for the throne, but their dad decides he'd rather Ku stop being a piece of shit that bullies its neighbors. Hypothetically, but not really as discussed earlier, so he makes Hikari his heir. Mugen then burns down the town, strange choice since he wants to rule it, murders his dad, and takes the crown while Hikari flees through the desert. We're also introduced to Ritsu, Hikari's childhood frenemy turned Mugen loyalist. Would have loved to see that to be a bigger, more layered part of the story, but my friends, it was not. He'll be back, but it won't be great. Sorry, I was kind of laughing there because the dog hit her treats now button. As soon as I finish recording this voiceover, dog gets treats. Alright, as setups go, it's fine. Nothing inspired, but nothing terrible either. Hikari sets out into the world to recruit some friends and allies. He repeatedly encounters his Satsui no Hado. In this game, it's called the Curse of Ku, and it makes his family members just really like murdering a couple of times. This can be seen as the internal conflict of the story, but it once again doesn't really work that way because of how it's handled. After Hikari has won a battle, his shadow will come out and go, "Come on, buddy, just kill him." And Hikari simply shrugs it off and doesn't because he's fundamentally good. He's not a complex character. Dog still wants treats. In the final act, he will anticlimactically defeat his shadow in between the actual important battles with Ritsu and Mugen. So, allies gather. Kind of. One of his allies, Raimei, acts like she's not going to help, but it's incredibly obvious that she will, in fact, be helping. Everyone storms Castle Ku, and Ritsu is waiting to stop Hikari. They have an incredibly stupid conversation in which Hikari tells Ritsu that they're still bros, they don't really have to fight. Ritsu can just join him on the side of good. But no, Ritsu says he's trapped by the sunk cost effect, he's gonna fight to the death. Clearly, the writers just thought it would be more impactful to make Hikari kill his friend Ritsu, and they found an expedient, a key word here I think, way for that to happen. The entire script is riddled with expedient events and conversations that are transparently there to propel plot forward. And they could easily do this with such cardboard cutouts for characters. Part of this is the short form structure they're saddled with, but I feel strongly there was a lack of ambition to make it work better than whatever this is. And this matters so much, because it's where the game consistently failed me. At only one point in the story did I feel or think much of anything. Alright, it clearly made me think about narrative structure in video games, but I don't think that's what it was going for. So Hikari defeats his evil brother Mugen, and finally, once again, with very little drama, gets rid of his annoying murder-hungry shadow. Ku is saved! They're not going to be comically evil anymore. It's going to rebuild with a robust social safety net. Hopefully someone else is going to take care of that, though, because Hikari has to bounce with the other 7 characters. And maybe it's more game structure than ambition, although I certainly think it's both. The plots for each character just have to go. There is not room in this overstuffed game to progress the story in a smart or emotionally engaging fashion. They resort over and over again to the cheap hook of, "Oh no, someone close to you died," during the game more years ago. For Hikari, it was 4. His mother, then his father, then Ritsu's sister, then Ritsu himself. For Oswald, it was his wife and child. For Casti, it was basically everyone she knew. For Agnia, it was her mother. For Throne, it was her mother and her 3 first chapter friends. And just like Hikari, she had to kill one of those friends herself. For Temenos, it was Crick and the goddamn Pope. Ochette and Particio were the only 2 characters to avoid this. And you might say, internet celebrity Brad Pritchard, clearly, death and how the living hold and move on is a theme of the game. And I will tell you, dear friends, I disagree strongly with any such contention. These characters have about 10 seconds to think about any dead characters. Except Oswald, who has, get this, an archetypal revenge story. Before we gotta get on with this plot. And all this death has had almost no permanent effect on their personalities, as the existence of the toxic positivity crew shows time and time again in the shorter narrative bits that are interspersed throughout the game. Alright, before I get into how much I dislike the final chapter of the game from a narrative perspective, I really do want to share some of the story parts that I liked, although in one case I think it's a total game design triumph more than a writing one, although that certainly mattered as well. My favorite story was Agnia the Dancers, and it wasn't really because of her in any real sense. She was bubbly and positive and loves to dance and wants to make a total jam to show the world. Nice enough, very in line with the other characters' motivations as well. What made her story special was Dulcinea, the antagonist. Dulcinea is a huge star, bigger than Taylor Swift or even Travis Kelce's, She's everything Agnia wants to be, at least on the surface. She's scraped her way from an impoverished orphan childhood all the way to the top, but inside her she carries a deep shame about her upbringing that has given her both a drive to stay at the top and a desire to erase her past. She wants to pave over the slum she grew up in and replace with kind of a dickhead version of Dollywood. For my money, Dulcinea is the most relatable character in the game, antagonist or protagonist. She's not outright evil or good, she's just a person with a past she doesn't like and a present she'll always defend. Is it super nuanced? No, not really. But when compared to the other antagonists, hell yeah, those people are a bunch of freak shows. They sometimes had relatable motivation, jealousy or greed, but dialed up to 11. But oftentimes, they didn't. They were just evil. So, we have a memorable, and even somewhat likable antagonist, our fun and sweet if one note protagonist, and the big song and dance off. And here's where the overall game production quality enhanced good but not great writing to make it something special. Alright, what makes it special? 1. The fight with Dulcinea is really good both mechanically and artistically across both stages. And artistically I mean both the pixel art, which is beautiful, and the music, which I'm gonna get into a whole lot more now. And 2. Holy shit. The Song of Hope, Agnia's theme. She'd been traveling the world to write a song that would make the world smile, and composer Yasunori Nishiki over-delivered. This song plays during the second stage of the fight, and it's incredible. This was the one time I really felt something the entire course of playing this game. Agnia did it. She wrote a truly incredible song, and everyone in the world should hear it. I was spent after winning that boss fight on the third attempt, and the writing, by which I mean the characterization of Dulcinea, was definitely part of it, but it wouldn't have worked without the mechanical excellence, art, and music design. I bought that Song of Hope MP3 and have been listening to it ever since. It's my new favorite video game track, beating the Final Fantasy XIII theme, which is a great song tied to a mediocre game. Does Dulcinea learn and grow from this? It's not really clear. She fucks off and politely gives Agnia the stage. There was clearly no rancor there. She never hated Agnia anyway. She was just doing Dulcinea things. Did she end up paving over her hometown? Well, I guess not. It's really hard to say. We really don't know. I also greatly enjoyed most of Throne's story. She's trying to escape the slavery of her Assassin's Guild, and to do so, she needs keys to her doggy shot collar from the guild leader's mother and father to free herself. Her journey across the world to defeat them was really good. The dialogue was good, the characters were good, the story moved along at a great pace. It didn't feel quite so rushed as many of the others. But if you can see a but coming, you're a prescient viewer. The last chapter of her story was so transcendently stupid that it nearly retroactively ruined the whole thing for me. Here's some of the dumbest spoilers you will ever hear. Haha! Mother and father's keys don't actually remove the shot collar. They set her on the path to her real father. And who is that? He's an immortal weirdo who's been conducting a centuries-long breeding program to create a super assassin who can kill him. That's you! That's Throne. I almost uninstalled right there. Now, this wasn't out of the blue. There were some hints and foreshadowing that something was up with similar-looking people popping up. Kinda weird, right? But I wasn't thinking quasi-immortal sex creep. So, what started as what I thought was some pretty decent storytelling, if not necessarily ambitious, ended up as bizarre nonsense. Alright, and before I start wrapping this up, let me talk about my favorite relationship in the game. Honestly, There aren't a ton to choose from. There are 4 2-chapter sections of the game in which the travelers pair off and do some side quests. So one of those 4 pairings seems like a likely choice, but for me, no, not really. None of them hit all that hard. I like the Hikari Agnia one a bit, but that's about it. The best relationship, hands down, in this game is Temenos and Crick. Unfortunately, it's a bit short-lived, as like so many others, Crick didn't make it, but the interplay between the sarcastic but not jaded Inquisitor Temenos and the slightly bumbling and idealistic Sacred Guard Crick was a really good time. The characters bounced off each other far better than any other pairing in the game. Their relationship evolved from skepticism to friendship, and then naturally to tragically. It was the best writing in the game, I think. It wasn't adventurous or bold or anything, but it was well done, and it gave their relationship stakes that I don't feel like any other relationship had. And then, there's the end game. After completing all character and buddy chapters, you enter the final stretch. And I'm not going to go deeply into it, but it was the most ham-handed, mashed-on thing I've encountered in a long while. Now, at the very beginning of the game, it was clear who the real cause of the world's problems was. But then throughout the individual stories, some were tangentially connected, but often more in retrospect than anything else. In a couple cases, strongly connected. Oshet's story, I think, stands out there, and Temenos' to some extent as well. But in a couple cases, pretty much completely unrelated. They ripped some side characters from individual stories, jammed them in with some of the worst, most generic, cliched motivations in the world of RPGs. For example, I'm not evil, mwahaha. I just want to end suffering, so everyone must die. No. Stop doing that. Please stop. Oh, and Mint, a tiny sign character who just seemed very nice, was evil all along. Sure, why not? Kazan too? Okay then. Ori? Whatever. I don't care anymore. The sad part is that one of my favorite parts of the game is the very beginning of this final chapter, where the travelers are all gathered around the campfire to talk. Why? Well, it gives the impression that these characters actually know each other. It was a brief, nice moment before you discover just how bad the cobbled together last act is. This was, in my opinion, the actual least ambitious part of the game. Was it retrofitted into it? I don't really know, but it certainly felt like it. There was foreshadowing to some extent for the pieces, I guess. It was, in some cases, clear, and in some cases, not so much. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was added after those 8 stories were created. And to some extent, I really hope so. Because if this was the plan all along, you can double the vehemence of all my critiques. Now, the fights were still great. Don't get me wrong. But the story was a big, wet fart. Seemingly a response to the complaint that Octopath 1 stories didn't connect, really. Well, I guess we got what we wanted. They connect now. And how? How do they connect? Lazily. I cannot express how little I thought of the last act. Alright. Now let's discuss structure just a little bit, because I do think it was an actual impediment to quality, ambitious writing. The first problem is the dearth of character interactions. In Octopath, the game doesn't really know what characters will be in your party at any time. You first have to recruit all the characters, which I assume the vast majority of players do quickly, but you don't really have to do it all at once. Then you have to set your party of 4 in town. The other characters are just chilling out when you go out in the world. They're not coming with. So when you're in Throne's story, for example, your other characters are there in combat, but they're not actually there. They will never talk to you, except in the occasional non-voice acted asides, which I didn't think were very well done or particularly revelatory. They will never interact with the story in any way. And the characters are all given equal time, more or less. I'm not sure this is necessary. Seems like filling a time quota rather than telling a story. And just commit to a main story or don't. This one was extremely half-assed, and it showed really, really obviously. And I think it's instructive to look at Dragon Quest XI again. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, it had a stronger main story, but it also had incredible side stories. Eric and Sylvando's stories had ambition and execution far superior to anything Octopath 2 offers. And a lot of it is just they had more complete, multi-dimensional characters, but another part is they just have more time to have interactions with the hero especially, but also with the rest of the team. Knowing these characters and seeing their complexity makes it far easier to write emotionally satisfying, ambitious stories. At the same time, your whole team traveled with you. They didn't specifically need to be in your battle party to participate in plot. And again, the world is not the most coherent in Dragon Quest, but compared to Octopath, it kinda is. Sometimes Octopath just feels like 8 people walking alone through a world lacking in internal logic and engaging in fights with 3 strangers who just keep conveniently popping up. Now, Octopath shouldn't just become Dragon Quest, of course, but it should take some lessons from it. Find a way to force meaningful interactions between characters, whether it's forcing characters into parties at times, or having the party travel together, regardless if it's in the battle party, or incorporating camps. This would require some changes to the structure of the game, but I think the narrative benefit would be worth it. Challenge yourselves to make the individual stories connect in impactful ways, which is not an easy thing to do. It's hard, but it needs to be done. And more than anything, find stories you actually want to tell. A lot of the time, it felt like the story was as it was just because it's an RPG and RPGs have stories. You can still make a great game doing it this way. Octopath Traveler 2 is a great game. It's a triumph of game design, but its combat, music, and art leave the storytelling far in the rearview mirror. So it's never going to be my favorite game. It's a great game. I hope to revisit it sometime, but it'll never be up there for me because the story just doesn't quite work. Octopath Traveler 0 is due to ship in December. Will it address any of my concerns about the ambition and storytelling? Does it really need to? I'm on board even if it just maintains the status quo. Tell a nice, pleasant enough archetypal story and have amazing game mechanics married to beautiful graphics and music. I'll be fine. But I'd love a more ambitious approach to world building and storytelling to elevate it above the other games in the series. In any case, I'm excited to see what they'll do. Anyway, if anyone actually watches this video, which is somewhat unlikely, you might wholly disagree with me. If so, drop it in the comments, respectfully, preferably. And thank you so much for making it through this whole video. Bye.